The afternoon sun streams through my apartment windows as I adjust the color palette on my latest logo design for a local bakery. Pixel, my orange tabby, weaves between my legs while I work at my standing desk in Cedar Park. The gentle hum of my MacBook and the distant sound of kids playing in the courtyard create the perfect creative atmosphere. My phone buzzes against the wooden surface, displaying First National Bank of Texas across the screen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I almost decline the call, assuming it's another credit card promotion, but something makes me answer. Hello, this is Emma Rodriguez. Good afternoon, Emma. This is Jessica Chen from First National Bank of Texas. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. The voice sounds familiar, professionally warm, but with an undertone I can't quite place. No, it's fine. How can I help you? I minimize the design software, giving the call my attention. I'm calling regarding your mortgage account. We show that your payment is 37 days overdue, and I wanted to discuss payment options before we proceed with any collection actions. My hand freezes over my wireless mouse. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. I don't have a mortgage. I rent my apartment here in Cedar Park. A pause. Is this Emma Rodriguez, social security number ending in 4729? The room suddenly feels smaller. Yes, but there's definitely been a mistake. I've never applied for a mortgage loan. Let me verify a few more details. Date of birth September 15, 1996. Current address 1247. Willow Creek Drive, Cedar Park. That's correct, but I'm telling you I don't have a mortgage. Our records show you as the primary borrower on a home loan for $8,942 Meadowbrook Lane in Pflugerville. The original loan amount was $285,000, and the current balance is $267,000. The monthly payment of $1,950 was due on the 15th of last month. I stand up so quickly that Pixel jumps off my desk with an annoyed meow. That's not possible. I design logos and websites. I can barely afford my rent, let alone a mortgage payment that size. Emma, this is actually Jessica Chen. We were roommates senior year at UT. Do you remember me? The voice clicks into place, and I sink back into my chair. Jessica from the communications program. You're the bank manager calling me about a mortgage I never applied for. I wish this was a social call, but yes. When I saw your name come across my desk for collections, I had to call personally. Emma, someone has definitely used your identity to secure this loan. This is serious. My coffee grows cold as I stare at the mortgage documents Jessica emailed me 20 minutes ago. The address jumps out immediately. 8942 Meadowbrook Lane, Pflugerville. I've been to that house. I helped my sister Sam and her boyfriend Kyle move into that exact address 18 months ago. The same weekend they celebrated their amazing luck getting approved for their first home loan despite Sam's unemployment and Kyle's part-time income. The same house where I spent countless weekends helping them paint bedrooms, install ceiling fans, and plant their backyard garden. The house where Mom insisted we hold last month's family dinner because Sam's finally getting her life together. The house that's apparently been financed using my name, my credit, and my financial future. I scroll through my email history, searching for those credit monitoring alerts I dismissed as spam
Over the past 2 years.
They're all there, buried between work emails and online shopping confirmations. New account opened. Credit inquiry detected. Significant change to credit. Credit utilization. I'd glanced at them and assumed they were system errors or phishing attempts. Pixel jumps back onto my desk, purring against my laptop screen as if sensing my distress. I scratch behind his ears while calling my credit monitoring service, my hands trembling slightly as I navigate their phone menu. Good afternoon, this is Marcus with Credit Guard Plus. How can I assist you today? Hi, I need to review my credit report. I think there might be fraudulent accounts. I can help with that. Let me pull up your file using the phone number you're calling from. The sound of keyboard clicks fills the silence. Okay, Miss Rodriguez, I see you have 3 active credit accounts. Your oldest account is a student loan from 2018, then a Visa card you opened in 2019, and a mortgage account that was opened in March 2022. The mortgage account, can you tell me more about that? It shows as a conventional home loan through First National Bank of Texas for $285,000. The account has been current until this month. Your credit utilization is showing as excellent across all accounts. Current until this month, which means Sam and Kyle have been making payments using money from somewhere. But where? Kyle's part-time job at the auto parts store pays maybe $1,200 monthly, and Sam lost her administrative assistant position 6 months ago. The math doesn't work unless they've been getting money from someone else. Can you see what address is associated with the mortgage? The property address shows as 8942 Meadowbrook Lane, Pflugerville, Texas 78660. I thank Marcus and hang up, then immediately call Jessica back. She answers on the first ring. Emma, I was hoping you'd call back. I've been looking through the loan file, and there are some things you need to see. Like what? The application was submitted online, but all the documentation looks legitimate. Pay stubs from Creative Solutions Design Studio, bank statements from your checking account, even a letter of employment verification. Someone had access to very detailed financial information about you. Creative Solutions is where I work as a freelance contractor. The only people who would know my exact income and employment details would be my immediate family, since I've shared that information when they've asked about my success in graphic design. Jess, I need to see everything. The application, the signatures, all of it. I can have copies ready this afternoon, but Emma, you need to file a police report immediately. This isn't just identity theft. This is mortgage fraud, and it's a federal crime. After ending the call, I sit in the unusual quiet of my apartment. Even Pixel seems to sense something's wrong, staying close instead of wandering off for his afternoon nap. The design project for the bakery remains unfinished on my screen, colorful and cheerful, a stark contrast to the dark reality unfolding in my inbox. I think about the family dinner 3 weeks ago, at Sam and Kyle's house. How proud Mom was of the renovated kitchen, the new hardwood floors in the living room. How Dad kept mentioning how responsible Sam had become, finally taking on adult obligations like homeownership. How Kyle showed off their new riding lawnmower, joking about keeping up with the neighbors. All funded by a mortgage in my name. The doorbell rings, startling both Pixel and me from our shared anxiety spiral. I check the peephole and see a woman in a professional blazer holding a manila envelope. Miss Rodriguez. I'm Sarah from First National Bank. Jessica Chen asked me to deliver these.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Documents to you personally. I sign for the envelope with hands that feel disconnected from my body. Inside, I find photocopies of the entire mortgage application, dozens of pages of forms and supporting documentation. The signature on the final page makes my stomach drop. It's mine, or rather it's a perfect forgery of mine. The slight leftward slant, the way my R curves into the O, even the little flourish I add to the Zeitz and Rodriguez. Whoever did this has watched me sign documents many times, studied my handwriting carefully enough to reproduce it with frightening accuracy. I spread the papers across my dining table and call Rachel, my best friend and fellow designer at Creative Solutions. Emma, perfect timing. I was just finishing up the Henderson Landscaping logo. Your family's business is really taking off, huh? What do you mean? Your sister Sam stopped by the office yesterday asking about your income verification letter. She said you were applying for a car loan and needed official documentation from us. I gave her a copy of your contractor agreement and last year's payment summary. The room spins slightly. Sam came to our office. Yeah, she said she was running errands for you since you were swamped with the bakery project. She seemed to know all about your current workload, so I figured you'd asked her to handle it. Rachel, I never asked Sam to get anything from the office. I haven't applied for any loans. Silence stretches between us. Emma, what's going on? I explain everything while pacing around my small apartment, Pixel following my movements with concerned eyes. Rachel listens without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief. So your sister basically stole your identity to buy a house. It looks that way, and she used employment verification documents from our office to do it. What are you going to do? The question hangs in the air like smoke. What am I going to do? 24 hours ago, my biggest concern was whether to use teal or turquoise in a logo design. Now I'm facing mortgage fraud, family betrayal, and the potential destruction of relationships I've spent my entire life building. I don't know yet, but I'm meeting with Jessica tomorrow to go through everything and figure out my options. That evening I drive through Pflugerville to 8942 Meadowbrook Lane. Sam's Honda Accord sits in the driveway next to Kyle's pickup truck. The house looks exactly as I remember it. Modest ranch style with the blue shutters we painted together, the front garden where I helped plant roses for Mother's Day, the mailbox that Dad installed because Kyle didn't own the right tools. A mortgage payment of $1,950 per month for a house they could never qualify for on their own. I sit in my car across the street, watching lights move through the windows, trying to reconcile the sister who taught me to braid my hair with the person who stole my identity for financial gain. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom. Sunday dinner this week at Sam's house again. She's making your favorite enchiladas. 5 p.m., don't be late. I stare at the message, noting how comfortable Mom sounds about meeting at Sam's house, as if it's perfectly normal for an unemployed 25-year-old to own a home in one of Austin's more desirable suburbs. Has everyone been pretending not to notice how impossible their situation is, or do they all know exactly how this house was financed? The next morning, Jessica meets me at a coffee shop downtown rather than the bank, explaining that she wants to help but needs to be careful about her professional position. The application file is incredibly detailed, she says, sliding additional documents across the small table. Whoever did this had access to your tax returns, bank statements, employment records, even your utility bills. I flip through pages of financial information I've never seen compiled in one place. These bank statements show direct deposits I don't recognize. Those are the pay stubs from Creative Solutions, but they've been enhanced. Your actual income shows as $3,200 monthly, but these documents claim $4,800. Enhanced, professionally altered. The fonts match, the formatting is perfect, but the numbers have been changed to make you appear more financially qualified for the loan amount. Jessica points to another section of the application. This is the interesting part. The loan was approved, based on a debt-to-income ratio calculation using the inflated income figures, but it also required a co-signer. I don't understand. Someone else signed as a guarantor for the loan. If the primary borrower defaults, the co-signer becomes responsible for the full amount. She shows me a signature page I haven't seen before. There, in familiar handwriting, is my father's signature, Michael Rodriguez, guarantor. The pieces start falling into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't just Sam and Kyle taking advantage of my good credit. This was a family plan involving my parents, using my identity to secure a loan that Dad co-signed, ensuring the mortgage would be approved despite the falsified income documentation. Emma, your father would have had to provide his own financial statements and credit information to qualify as a co-signer. This wasn't impulse fraud, this was calculated and planned. I think about Dad's small landscaping business, Henderson Landscaping, the same business Rachel mentioned yesterday. The business that's been taking off according to my coworker. The business that probably needed an address for licensing and insurance purposes. An address like 8942 Meadowbrook Lane. Jessica, what happens when I report this as fraud? The FBI will investigate. Your father could face charges for his role as co-signer, and Sam and Kyle will likely lose the house. But Emma, if you don't report it, you're legally responsible for a $267,000 debt that's already in default. I drive home through Austin traffic, my mind cycling through 28 years of family dynamics. How I've always been the responsible one. The daughter who got scholarships, graduated on time, found steady work. How I've been asked to co-sign various documents over the years, because of my excellent credit. How grateful everyone always seems when I help with family financial matters. But I've never actually co-signed anything. I've just been used as a backup plan, a financial safety net nobody bothered to ask permission to deploy. That afternoon, I called David Martinez, the attorney Jessica recommended. His office overlooks Lady Bird Lake, and he listens to my story while taking detailed notes. Miss Rodriguez, you have several options, none of them simple. You can file a police report and dispute the mortgage as fraud, which will trigger a federal investigation. You can try to work out a private agreement with your family for them to refinance or sell the property. Or you can accept responsibility for the debt and begin making payments. What would you recommend? Honestly, file the police report. This level of identity theft and fraud won't just disappear, and the longer you wait, the more complicated it becomes. Your family essentially stole your financial future. That's not something you can or should ignore. Sunday dinner at Sam's house feels surreal. I arrive with a folder containing copies of everything: the mortgage application, the forged signatures, the employment verification documents Rachel provided, the police report I filed Friday afternoon. Mom answers the door with her usual enthusiasm, hugging me tight and commenting on how thin I look. "You work too hard, Mbia. Come eat." The house smells like cumin and chili powder, the familiar scent of Mom's cooking that usually feels like home. Tonight it feels like evidence of a crime I'm about to expose. Dad sits at the head of the table, carving barbacoa, while discussing his landscaping contracts. Sam and Kyle hover around the kitchen, playing the role of gracious hosts in their beautiful home. The same home I helped them decorate, never questioning how they afforded the furniture, the appliances, the monthly payments. "Emma, you've been quiet tonight," Sam says, setting a plate of enchiladas in front of me. "Everything okay?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to everyone about something important." The conversation dies as 4 pairs of eyes focus on me. I reach for my folder, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I got a call from First National Bank this week about a mortgage payment that's overdue." Mom frowns. "A mortgage? Emma, you rent your apartment." That's what I told them. "But apparently, I'm the primary borrower on the loan for this house." Sam's fork clatters against her plate. Kyle suddenly becomes very interested in his food. Dad continues chewing slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's impossible," Mom says. "You've never applied for a mortgage." I place the mortgage application on the table. This is my signature on a loan application I never signed, for a house I never bought, using employment verification documents someone obtained from my workplace, without my knowledge. Sam's face drains of color. "Emma, I can explain. Can you explain how you got copies of my tax returns? My bank statements? My employment records?" "We needed help," Kyle says quietly. "The loan officer said we needed a co-borrower with better credit, so you committed identity theft." "We didn't steal anything." Sam's voice rises defensively. "We make the payments. We take care of everything. You don't even have to think about it. Except the payments are 37 days late, and the bank is calling me about foreclosure proceedings." Dad finally speaks, his voice heavy with resignation. "How much do they want?" $1,950 a month, plus late fees and penalties." "But that's not the point, Dad. The point is that you all used my identity to commit mortgage fraud, and now I'm legally responsible for a debt I never agreed to take on." Mom reaches across the table toward my hand. "We can figure this out as a family. Sam and Kyle just need a little more time to get back on their feet." "Mom, this isn't about time. This is about federal fraud. I filed a police report Friday." The room goes completely silent. Sam starts crying. Kyle pushes back from the table and walks to the window. Dad sets down his fork and looks directly at me for the first time all evening. "You called the police on your own family." "I reported a crime that was committed using my identity. The fact that family members committed it doesn't make it legal." "We're your family," Mom says, her voice breaking. "Family helps family. Family asks for help. They don't steal it." Sam looks up from her tears. "You could just take over the payments. You make good money with your design work." "I make $3,200 a month, Sam. The mortgage payment alone is more than half my income. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't afford it." "We could all contribute," Dad suggests. "Make it work together." "No," the word comes out stronger than I intended. "I'm not covering for fraud. I'm not pretending this is okay. And I'm not destroying my financial future to protect people who stole from me." Kyle turns from the window. "So what happens now?" "They take our house. Our kids lose their home. You should have thought about that before you forged my signature." I gather my folder and stand to leave. Behind me, Sam's crying escalates into sobs. Mom pleads for me to reconsider. Dad asks me to think about the family's reputation. But for the first time in my life, I walk out of a family gathering, without trying to fix everyone else's problems. In my car, I sit for a moment in their driveway, looking at the house I helped them make into a home, knowing I may never be welcome there again. 3 months later, I'm sitting in Dr. Lisa Thompson's office, a bright space filled with plants and natural light in the wellness center on Barton Springs Road. We've been working together since the FBI investigation began, unpacking decades of family dynamics I never recognized as problematic. How are you feeling about the resolution? She asks, referring to the news I received yesterday. Relieved, I think. The bank accepted the fraud documentation, and the mortgage has been removed from my credit report. Sam and Kyle are losing the house, but they worked out a payment plan to avoid criminal charges. And your family? Dad won't speak to me. Mom sends occasional texts, but they're always about how I've hurt everyone. Sam blames me for ruining her life. How does that feel? But also, free? I spent so many years being the family safety net that I never realized I was enabling them to make increasingly bad decisions. Dr. Thompson nods. Family systems often designate one person as the responsible caretaker. That person becomes so invested in maintaining family harmony that they sacrifice their own well-being. I keep thinking about all the times I signed documents for them over the years. Permission slips, insurance forms, tax papers. I thought I was being helpful, but I was actually training them to use my signature without asking. Recognition is the first step toward establishing healthy boundaries. My phone buzzes with a text from Jessica. Coffee this weekend. I have news about the house situation. I show Dr. Thompson the message. My friend from the bank wants to meet. I think she has updates about the foreclosure. How do you feel about staying connected to this situation? I want to know what happens, but I don't want to get pulled back into trying to fix it. That Saturday, Jessica and I meet at the Daily Grind on South Lamar. She looks more relaxed than she has since this whole situation started, no longer carrying the weight of professional conflict between helping a friend and following bank protocols. The house sold at auction yesterday, she tells me over. Sam and Kyle have 30 days to move out. Did they find somewhere to go? Actually, yes. Your parents are letting them move back into the family house temporarily. And there's something else you should know. She slides a legal document across the table. The FBI investigation uncovered some additional information. Your father's landscaping business was using the Meadowbrook Lane address for business registration and commercial insurance. They were essentially running a company out of a house they obtained through fraud. So it wasn't just about Sam and Kyle needing somewhere to live. No, it was about establishing a business address in a more affluent zip code to attract higher-end clients. The mortgage fraud was part of a larger scheme to elevate the family business. I think about all the times Dad mentioned big landscaping contracts, new commercial clients, the success of Henderson Landscaping. How proud he seemed of the business growth, never mentioning that it was built on a foundation of identity theft and fraud. Emma, there's one more thing. The bank recovered most of the outstanding mortgage balance through the foreclosure sale, but there's still about $15,000 in payments, penalties and legal fees. Since you were never actually responsible for the debt, the bank is pursuing your father for the full amount as the co-signer. 2 weeks later, Dad calls me for the first time since the family dinner confrontation. His voice sounds older, defeated. Emma, we need to talk. About what? The bank wants $15,000. They're threatening to garnish my wages and put a lien on the family house. I'm sorry to hear that. Can you help us? Maybe set up a payment plan or negotiate with them. You know people at the bank. The request hangs between us like a bridge. I'm not willing to cross. For a moment I feel the familiar. To smooth over, to make everyone else's problems disappear at my own expense. Dad, I can't help you with this. You co-signed a fraudulent mortgage using my stolen identity. The consequences of that decision are yours to handle. You're really going to let them take our house? I'm not letting them do it. These are the natural consequences of choices you make. Your mother is having anxiety attacks. The stress is affecting her health. The guilt trip feels familiar, but for the first time it doesn't work. Dr. Thompson and I have spent hours discussing these manipulation tactics, and I recognize them clearly now. I hope Mom gets the help she needs for her anxiety. But that doesn't change my position. You used to care about this family. I still care, but caring doesn't mean enabling criminal behavior or sacrificing my financial future for other people's bad decisions. 6 months after the initial phone call from Jessica, I'm thriving in ways I never expected. My design business has grown significantly, partly because I'm no longer distracted by constant family financial crises. I moved to a larger apartment with space for a proper home office. Pixel seems happier too, with more windows to watch birds from and sunny spots for afternoon naps. Rachel and I have started a design partnership, Creative Solutions Plus, and we're already booking clients 3 months out. The structure and boundaries I learned to establish with my family have translated into better professional relationships and clearer business practices. Mom and I exchange texts occasionally, careful conversations that avoid any mention of mortgages, police reports, or family finances. She sends photos from her garden, updates about her book club, safe topics that don't trigger arguments about loyalty and responsibility. Sam sends a friend request on social media, which I decline. Not out of anger, but out of recognition that some relationships can't survive the truth. Kyle messages me once, apologizing and asking if we can start over. I don't respond, understanding that starting over isn't the same as making amends. The hardest part isn't the lost relationships, but the realization of how much of my identity was built around being useful to people who were willing to exploit that usefulness. Thompson calls it recovering from codependency, learning to find value in myself that isn't tied to what I can provide for others. Dad pays the $15,000 to the bank in installments, money that comes from selling equipment from Henderson Landscaping. The business downsizes significantly, operating out of the family garage instead of a commercial address. He never directly apologizes, but I receive a birthday card with a note. Proud of the woman you've become, even when I don't understand her choices. It's not the reconciliation I once would have hoped for, but it's honest. And honesty, I've learned, is worth more than harmony built on enabling dysfunction. 1 year later, I'm featured in Austin Monthly magazine as one of the city's rising creative entrepreneurs. The article mentions my design partnership with Rachel, our commitment to ethical business practices, and our work with local nonprofits. There's no mention of mortgage fraud, family betrayal, or the FBI investigation that taught me the difference between loyalty and exploitation. But those experiences shaped every boundary I've learned to set, every healthy relationship I've built since then, and every decision I make about who deserves access to my time, energy, and trust. Jessica and I maintain our friendship, meeting monthly for coffee and updates about our respective careers. She's been promoted to regional manager, partly due to her handling of fraud cases and her reputation for ethical banking practices. Do you ever regret reporting it? She asks during one of our coffee dates. No, I answer without hesitation. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret protecting myself. Your family, my family, taught me that love without boundaries isn't actually love. It's just convenient exploitation wrapped in emotional manipulation. That evening, I work on a logo design for a small family restaurant, creating something beautiful and meaningful for business owners who built their success through hard work and integrity. Pixel purrs beside my computer, content in our peaceful apartment where no one demands access to my finances, my credit, or my identity without permission. My phone remains silent, except for legitimate work calls and messages from friends who respect my boundaries. The quiet feels like victory, like the sound of a life built on authentic foundations rather than borrowed stability that we never really mined to begin with. Tomorrow I'll wake up in a home I pay for myself, work on projects I chose, and make decisions based on my own values rather than family pressure. It's a simple life, but it's genuinely mine in ways I never understood were possible before learning to say no to people
Who mistook my competence for their entitlement. The mortgage fraud case is closed, but the lessons continue to guide every choice I make about trust, boundaries, and the difference between helping someone and allowing them to help themselves to your life. The stack of documents grows taller on my dining table as I methodically work through every piece of evidence Jessica provided. Each page reveals another layer of deception so carefully orchestrated that I have to admire the thoroughness even as it makes me sick. Pixel has claimed a spot on the windowsill, occasionally glancing at me with what seems like concern as I mutter under my breath about forged pay stubs and falsified employment records. The morning light filtering through my apartment reveals details I missed during yesterday's initial shock. The mortgage application contains information I've never compiled in one place, financial data that would require intimate knowledge of my business operations and personal habits. Someone didn't just guess at my income or forge a signature. They conducted surveillance on my life for months, maybe years, gathering intelligence with the patience of a professional con artist. I call Creative Solutions and ask to speak with Marcus, our office manager who handles all contractor documentation and payment records. His voice carries the usual Monday morning exhaustion, but he perks up when I explain what I need. Emma, that's really weird that you're asking about this. Your sister was just here again on Friday asking for additional income verification documents. She said you were applying for a business loan and needed 3 years of payment history. My stomach drops like I've missed a step going downstairs. Sam was there again. Marcus, I never sent Sam to get anything from the office. I haven't applied for any loans. Oh no, she seemed to know all about your current projects, mentioned the Rodriguez family landscaping account specifically. I assumed you'd asked her to handle the paperwork while you focused on design work. The Rodriguez family landscaping account. The connection I've been trying to avoid acknowledging suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. My father's business hasn't just been using the fraudulent mortgage address for commercial purposes. They've been listing me as their primary graphic designer, using my legitimate business relationship with Creative Solutions to build credibility for their own operations. Marcus, what exactly did you give her? Complete payment records for the past 3 years, tax documentation we file for your 1099 status, even the client satisfaction surveys that mention your work quality. She said it was for a business development loan application. A business development loan. Yeah, something about expanding the landscaping company and needing to demonstrate reliable income from their contracted designer. I thought it was smart of your family to document their professional relationships for lending purposes. After ending the call, I pace around my small apartment while Pixel watches with increasing alarm. The scope of this fraud extends far beyond a simple mortgage scam. My family has been systematically building a false financial profile using my legitimate business success as collateral for their schemes. The landscaping company, the house, the loan applications, everything interconnected in a web of deception that positions me as both the unwitting enabler and the ultimate victim. I open my laptop and begin researching Henderson Landscaping online, something I realize I've never actually done despite hearing about the business for years. Their website features professional photos of completed projects, testimonials from satisfied customers, and a detailed services page that emphasizes their relationship with award-winning designer Emma Rodriguez for all marketing and branding needs. Award-winning designer. I've never won any awards. The testimonials mention my innovative approach to outdoor space design and my collaborative relationship with the Henderson team. I've never designed any outdoor spaces. The photos show landscaping projects I've never seen, in neighborhoods I've never visited, attributed to collaborative efforts between Henderson Landscaping and Rodriguez Design Services. Rodriguez Design Services doesn't exist. I work as an independent contractor through Creative Solutions, occasionally taking freelance projects under my own name, but I've never registered a separate business entity. Yet according to this website, I'm a full partner in a thriving design-build company specializing in high-end residential landscaping. I call the Texas Secretary of State's office and request business registration information for Rodriguez Design Services. The clerk's fingers click across a keyboard while I hold my breath. Yes, I show Rodriguez Design Services registered in April 2022 as a limited liability company. Primary business address is 8942 Meadowbrook Lane, Pflugerville. Registered agent is listed as Emma Rodriguez, with Michael Rodriguez as secondary contact and Kyle Henderson as operations manager. April 2022. 2 months after the mortgage was approved for the Meadowbrook Lane house. They didn't just steal my identity for a home loan. They created an entire fictional business using my name, my reputation, and my legitimate work history to support their expanding fraud operation. Can you tell me what tax identification number is associated with that business registration? More keyboard clicking. The EIN matches your social security number, which is unusual but not unheard of for sole proprietorships transitioning to LLC status. I thank the clerk and hang up, then immediately call the IRS business helpline. If they've been operating a business using my social security number as the tax ID, there should be filing requirements and potential tax liabilities I know nothing about. The IRS representative explains that Rodriguez Design Services filed quarterly employment tax returns for the past 18 months, reporting income from landscaping design contracts and paying employment taxes for 3 part-time employees. Kyle Henderson, Samantha Rodriguez, and Michael Rodriguez. According to our records, the business has been paying unemployment insurance, workers' compensation premiums, and social security contributions for these employees since mid-22. What address do you have on file for tax correspondence? 8942 Meadowbrook Lane, Pflugerville, Texas. Every piece of mail from the IRS, every tax notice, every business correspondence has been going to Sam and Kyle's house. The house financed with a fraudulent mortgage in my name. They've been intercepting federal tax documents while operating a business registered under my identity, paying themselves salaries that probably helped them qualify for the original mortgage application. I ask for copies of all business tax filings to be sent to my Cedar Park address, then spend the next hour on hold with various state agencies, discovering that Rodriguez Design Services also holds a Texas landscape contractor's license, a City of Austin business permit, and workers' compensation insurance through the state fund. The business license application required proof of educational background and professional experience. Someone submitted copies of my University of Texas transcripts, my portfolio from Creative Solutions, and fabricated documentation claiming certification in landscape architecture and sustainable design practices. The license allows them to bid on commercial projects, municipal contracts, and residential developments requiring bonded contractors. By noon, I've uncovered a sophisticated business identity theft operation that makes the mortgage fraud look like a simple family misunderstanding. They haven't just stolen my name, they've stolen my entire professional identity and used it to create a legitimate business that's been operating for over a year, generating income, paying taxes, and building a reputation in the Austin landscaping industry. My phone rings while I'm scanning through printed copies of business registrations and tax documents. The caller ID shows a number I don't recognize, but something compels me to answer. Hello, this is Emma. Miss Rodriguez, this is Jennifer Walsh from Sunset Ridge Development. I'm calling about the landscape design proposal Rodriguez Design Services submitted for our new residential community in Round Rock. My mouth goes dry. I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I don't work in landscape design. Oh, you must be thinking of your graphic design work. Kyle Henderson explained that you handle both the visual branding and the actual landscape architecture for your project. Very impressive portfolio, by the way. The integration of hardscape elements with native plant communities shows real expertise. Miss Walsh, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding. I need to call you back. I hang up and immediately search online for Sunset Ridge Development. Their website shows a luxury residential community with homes starting at $400,000, emphasizing sustainable design and native landscaping. The project timeline indicates they're accepting contractor bids for the initial phase, which includes landscaping for 43 home sites. If Rodriguez Design Services wins this contract, they'll be responsible for landscaping work worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. Work they're completely unqualified to perform, using credentials and expertise stolen from my legitimate design background. The liability implications make my head spin. If something goes wrong with their work, if they fail to complete projects or violate safety regulations, the legal responsibility traces back to me as the registered business owner. I call David Martinez, the attorney Jessica recommended, and explain the expanding scope of what we discovered. Miss Rodriguez, this is significantly more serious than simple mortgage fraud. Operating a business using someone else's professional credentials, especially in a licensed industry like contracting, constitutes multiple felonies. If they've been bidding on municipal or federal projects, it could involve federal procurement fraud as well. What does that mean for me legally? Until we can prove you had no knowledge or involvement in the business operations, you're potentially liable for any contracts they've signed, any work they've performed, and any legal issues that arise from their activities. We need to document everything immediately and notify all relevant licensing agencies. How is this possible? How can someone just create a business using another person's identity? Unfortunately, it's easier than most people realize. The systems designed to prevent this kind of fraud rely heavily on documentation that family members often have access to. Birth certificates, social security numbers, educational transcripts, employment records. Your family has been positioning themselves to exploit your identity for years, probably without you realizing it. After the call with David, I drive to the University of Texas Registrar's office to request copies of my official transcripts and determine who else might have obtained them recently. The clerk, a friendly graduate student named Ashley, pulls up my academic record and checks the request history. It looks like transcripts were requested twice in the past 2 years. Once in March 2022 and again in September 2022. Both requests came from email addresses associated with Rodriguez Design Services and were picked up in person by authorized representatives. Who picked them up? The March request shows Michael Rodriguez, who provided identification and a notarized authorization letter with your signature. The September request was picked up by Samantha Rodriguez with similar documentation. Can I see copies of the authorization letters? Ashley retrieves the files and shows me documents bearing my forged signature, authorizing my father and sister to obtain official transcripts for business licensing purposes. The letters reference Rodriguez Design Services and claim the transcripts are needed for contractor certification and professional development documentation. These authorizations look legitimate, Ashley explains. The signatures match what we have on file, and the documentation follows our standard procedures for third-party transcript release. Driving home through Austin traffic, I try to process the systematic nature of this identity theft. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a temporary financial solution. My family spent months, maybe years, planning and executing a comprehensive fraud operation that infiltrated every aspect of my professional and financial life. The mortgage was just the beginning. They used my credit to establish the business address, my educational credentials to obtain professional licensing, my employment history to build credibility with clients, and my tax identification to legitimize their operations. They've been living off my reputation while building a business empire I never knew existed. Back at my apartment, I spread all the documents across my dining table and begin creating a timeline of events. The pattern emerges clearly when laid out chronologically. January 20. Initial mortgage application submitted using forged documents and inflated income statements. February 2022. Mortgage approved with dad as cosigner. March 2022. House purchase completed. University transcripts obtained for business licensing. April 2022. Rodriguez Design Services, registered as LLC using my identity. May 2022, business licensing approved, first employee payroll taxes filed. June 2022, first landscaping contract secured using stolen credentials. For 18 months, they've been operating a business in my name while I focused on my legitimate freelance work, completely unaware that my professional reputation was being leveraged for projects I never bid on. Using expertise I don't possess, creating legal liabilities I never agreed to assume. The scope of financial exposure becomes clearer as I research typical contractor liability issues. If Rodriguez Design Services has been performing landscape installation without proper insurance or expertise, if they've violated building codes or safety regulations, if they've failed to complete contracted work, the legal and financial consequences could extend far beyond the mortgage fraud. I call my auto insurance company to verify that no additional policies have been opened in my name, then check with homeowners insurance providers despite not owning property. The customer service representative at State Farm confirms that Rodriguez Design Services carries a commercial liability policy listing me as the primary insured party, with coverage limits of $500,000 for property damage and $1 million for bodily injury. The policy has been active since May 2022, with monthly premiums automatically deducted from a business checking account registered to your Social Security number. What bank is the checking account with? First National Bank of Texas. The account was opened using your business registration documents and personal identification. Another piece falls into place. They opened a business checking account in my name, using the fraudulent mortgage and business registration as supporting documentation. The account has been accumulating income from landscaping contracts while paying business expenses, employee salaries, and insurance premiums. All transactions flowing through an account I never opened, monitored by people who've been intercepting my mail and managing my financial obligations without my knowledge. I drive back to First National Bank and request a meeting with Jessica and her supervisor. The assistant manager, Patricia Vega, reviews my identification and the business account records, while Jessica explains the fraud investigation. Miss Rodriguez, this is extremely concerning. The business account shows significant activity over the past 18 months. Regular deposits from clients, payroll processing for 3 employees, tax payments, insurance premiums, equipment purchases, even business loan payments. Business loan payments, Patricia pulls up additional records. Rodriguez Design Services obtained a $75,000 equipment loan in June 2022, secured by the business assets and guaranteed by the Meadowbrook Lane property. The loan was used to purchase landscaping equipment, tools, and a commercial truck registered to the business. Jessica shakes her head in disbelief. Emma, they've built an entire business infrastructure using your identity. This goes way beyond the mortgage fraud we initially discovered. What's the current balance in the business account? Patricia checks the most recent statements. As of last week, the account shows a balance of $23,847. There are regular deposits from various clients, but also significant outflows for operational expenses. Who has access to this account? The signature cards show Emma Rodriguez as primary account holder with Kyle Henderson and Michael Rodriguez listed as authorized users. All three signatures are on file and have been used for various transactions. I stare at the signature cards, recognizing my father's handwriting and Kyle's sloppy scrawl, but the Emma Rodriguez signature is another perfect forgery, indistinguishable from my actual signature even under close examination. Can you freeze this account immediately? Given the fraud investigation and your sworn statement that you never opened or authorized this account, yes, we can place an immediate hold on all transactions pending resolution. Patricia initiates the account freeze while I try to comprehend the full implications. Rodriguez Design Services has been operating as a legitimate business for over a year, building relationships with clients, completing projects, establishing a reputation in the local landscaping industry. Freezing the business account will immediately halt their operations and potentially expose the fraud to everyone they've been working with. Miss Rodriguez, you should know that freezing this account will likely trigger bounced payments for their current obligations. Employee paychecks, loan payments, insurance premiums, client refunds. The business will essentially cease operating immediately. They've been operating illegally using my stolen identity. As we finalize the paperwork for the account freeze, Jessica mentions something that makes my blood run cold. Emma, there's one more thing you should know. The business account records show regular transfers to personal accounts belonging to your family members. Kyle Henderson has been receiving what appear to be salary payments, but Samantha Rodriguez and Michael Rodriguez have been getting much larger amounts listed as profit distributions. How much larger? Kyle's payments average $1,200 monthly, which seems reasonable for part-time labor. But Sam has been receiving $2,800 monthly, and your father gets $3,400 monthly. Over 18 months, that's more than $100,000 in combined payments to your family members from a business operated using your stolen identity. The drive home feels surreal, like I'm moving through someone else's life while trying to process information that doesn't seem possible. My family hasn't just stolen my identity for a mortgage. They've created an entire parallel version of my professional life, complete with business licensing, client relationships, employee payroll, and profit distributions, that have been funding their lifestyle for over a year. The mortgage payment they've been struggling with represents only a fraction of their monthly obligations. They've been operating a business with significant overhead, employee costs, loan payments, and insurance premiums, all dependent on continued income from landscaping contracts they're not qualified to fulfill. By freezing the business account, I've essentially triggered the immediate collapse of their entire operation. No money for payroll, no funds for current project completion, no ability to pay back clients who've made deposits for upcoming work. The legal and financial chaos will be immediate and comprehensive. My phone starts ringing as I pull into my apartment complex. Kyle's number appears on the screen, followed immediately by calls from Sam, Dad, and two numbers I don't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail while I climb the stairs to my apartment, Pixel greeting me at the door with unusual enthusiasm, as if sensing the stress radiating from my entire body. The first voicemail is Kyle, his voice tight with panic. Emma, something's wrong with the business account. Our payments are bouncing, and the bank says there's a fraud hold. Call me back immediately. The second message is from Sam, tears evident in her voice. Emma, please call us. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank. We need to talk to you right away. Dad's message is shorter and more direct. Emma, you need to fix this situation with the bank immediately. This affects the entire family. The two unknown numbers leave messages from clients of Rodriguez Design Services, asking about delayed project timelines and bounced payment checks. One mentions a deadline for a commercial landscaping project that's supposed to begin next week. I pour a glass of wine and sit on my couch with Pixel curled against my side, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I've discovered. My family didn't just betray my trust or steal my identity for a simple mortgage. They systematically dismantled and reconstructed my entire professional identity to support an elaborate business fraud that has been generating income and building obligations for over a year. The mortgage was just the foundation. The real structure they built on top of it includes business licensing fraud, tax fraud, employment fraud, contractor fraud, and probably procurement fraud if they've been bidding on municipal or federal contracts. The legal implications could include federal charges, significant financial liability, and professional consequences that could affect my legitimate design career for years. But sitting in my quiet apartment, with my cat purring peacefully beside me, and the evidence of systematic betrayal spread across my dining table, I feel something I didn't expect. Relief. The confusion of the past few years, the nagging sense that something wasn't quite right with my family's sudden prosperity, the credit alerts I dismissed as errors, all of it finally makes sense. I'm not crazy, I'm not paranoid. I'm the victim of an elaborate, long-term fraud operation conducted by people who exploited my love and trust to steal my identity and build a business empire I never knew existed. Tomorrow I'll call David Martinez and begin the process of disentangling myself from the legal and financial obligations they've created in my name. Tonight, I'm going to order Chinese takeout, watch a mindless romantic comedy, and appreciate the simple piece of a life that's genuinely my own, even if I'm only just beginning to understand what that means. The phone rings again, this time it's Mom. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear the explanations, justifications, and guilt trips that are undoubtedly coming. For the first time in my adult life, my family's crisis isn't my emergency to solve. Their business collapse isn't my problem to fix. Their legal troubles aren't my responsibility to minimize. I'm just Emma Rodriguez, graphic designer, cat owner, and finally, the sole proprietor of my own identity. The voicemails keep coming throughout the evening, each message more desperate than the last. My phone buzzes incessantly against the coffee table while I try to focus on a mindless Netflix series, Pixel occasionally lifting his head when the vibrations disturb his nap. By 10 p.m., I have 17 missed calls and 12 voicemails from various family members, plus 3 messages from numbers I don't recognize that claim to be Rodriguez Design Services clients, demanding explanations for bounced checks and canceled project meetings. I finally listened to the messages while making chamomile tea, needing something to steady my nerves, as the full scope of tonight's consequences becomes clear. Kyle's voice progressively deteriorates from panic to anger across 4 separate voicemails. In the first, he begs me to call the bank and resolve what he assumes is a computer error. By the 4th message, his tone has shifted to accusatory desperation. Emma, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're destroying everything we've built. We have clients expecting work to start tomorrow. We have employees who need their paychecks. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about people's livelihoods. Sam's messages follow a similar trajectory, beginning with confusion and escalating to emotional manipulation. Her final voicemail, left just before 10 p.m., includes background noise that suggests she's calling from a bar or restaurant. Emma, you need to understand what you've done. Kyle just got fired from his part-time job because his check to the auto parts store bounced. Our grocery money for this week was supposed to come from the landscaping account. Our kids are going to suffer because of whatever point you're trying to make. The reference to our kids strikes me as particularly manipulative, since Sam and Kyle don't have children yet, though Sam mentioned being pregnant during some family gathering months ago. The exaggeration feels deliberate, designed to maximize guilt and urgency. Dad's messages are characteristically direct and demanding. Unlike Kyle and Sam's emotional appeals, his voicemails carry the tone of authority he's used throughout my life when family situations required my intervention. Emma, call me immediately. I don't care what time you get this message. This situation with the bank needs to be resolved tonight. We have contractual obligations to clients who are depending on us. Your actions are putting the family's reputation and financial stability at risk. His assumption that I'll automatically prioritize the family's reputation over my own legal and financial protection reveals how deeply ingrained these expectations have become. Even faced with exposure of massive fraud, his primary concern remains maintaining the facade they've constructed, rather than acknowledging the criminal behavior that created this crisis. The messages from unknown numbers provide disturbing insight into the scope of Rodriguez Design Services' current obligations. A woman named Caroline Martinez explains that she paid a $5,000 deposit for landscape installation, scheduled to begin Monday morning, and she's received notification from her bank that the company's check for material purchases has been returned for insufficient funds. I'm calling because I'm concerned about whether your company can fulfill the contract we signed. My husband and I saved for 2 years to afford this project, and we've already removed existing landscaping based on your timeline. If there's a problem with your business operations, we need to know immediately. Another client, Thomas Chen from Sunset Ridge Development, leaves a more formal message, explaining that Rodriguez Design Services was selected as the primary contractor for a 43-home community landscaping project worth $280,000, with work scheduled to commence next week. Ms. Rodriguez, we've received concerning reports about financial irregularities with your business accounts. Given the scope of our contract and the timeline we've committed to our home buyers, we need immediate clarification about your company's operational status. Please contact our project management office first thing Monday morning.
Obligations my family has created using my stolen identity become staggering as I listen to message after message from clients, suppliers, and subcontractors who've entered into agreements with a business that technically doesn't exist in any legitimate sense. They've been operating Rodriguez Design Services as if it were a real company with real qualifications, taking deposits, signing contracts, and making commitments they have no ability to fulfill. I spend the next hour researching the legal implications of business fraud and contractor licensing violations, discovering that operating without proper credentials in the landscaping industry constitutes a third-degree felony in Texas. If Rodriguez Design Services has been performing work that requires licensed professionals, if they've been representing themselves as certified landscape architects or licensed contractors, the criminal charges could extend far beyond simple identity theft. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation website explains that unlicensed contracting can result in fines up to $20,000 per violation, plus criminal charges for each fraudulent transaction. Given the scope of contracts my family has apparently signed, the potential penalties could reach hundreds of thousands of dollars, even before considering the civil liability for incomplete or defective work. My laptop research reveals that Rodriguez Design Services has been advertising certified landscape architecture services, sustainable design expertise, and licensed contracting capabilities that require specific educational background and professional certification. The portfolio on their website includes projects that claim LEED certification compliance, native plant habitat restoration, and commercial irrigation system design, all specialties that require advanced training and professional licensing. None of us have any of these qualifications. I studied graphic design with a minor in marketing. Dad has experience with basic lawn maintenance and small residential landscaping. Kyle worked at an auto parts store before becoming involved with Sam. Sam has never held any job requiring technical expertise, yet they've been marketing themselves as qualified professionals capable of complex commercial landscaping projects. Around midnight, my phone rings with a call from a number I don't recognize. Something compels me to answer, perhaps curiosity about who else might be affected by tonight's financial chaos. Hello, this is Emma. Miss Rodriguez, this is Detective Angela Morrison with the Austin Police Department Financial Crimes Division. I'm calling about a report filed earlier today regarding business identity theft. Do you have a few minutes to discuss the Rodriguez Design Services investigation? My heart rate spikes immediately. Yes, of course. Though I should mention I have an attorney representing me in this matter. That's fine. I'm actually calling because we've received multiple complaints tonight from clients claiming to be victims of contractor fraud involving your business. Given the scope of the allegations, we need to schedule a formal interview to clarify your involvement in the company's operations. Detective Morrison, I filed the original fraud report because I discovered that my family has been operating a business using my stolen identity. I've never had any involvement in Rodriguez Design Services operations. I understand that's your position, Miss Rodriguez. However, we've received reports from clients who claim to have met with you personally, discussed project details with you directly, and received design consultations from you at various job sites. We need to reconcile those statements with your claim of non-involvement. The conversation takes on a surreal quality as Detective Morrison explains that multiple clients have provided detailed descriptions of meetings with Emma Rodriguez over the past year, including in-person consultations at their properties, design presentations at the Rodriguez Design Services office, and project management discussions that demonstrated extensive knowledge of landscaping techniques and sustainable design principles. Detective, I've never met with any landscaping clients. I work exclusively in graphic design from my home office in Cedar Park. I've never even been to most of the addresses you're probably referencing. Can you account for your whereabouts on Saturday, October 14th between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m.? We have a client who claims you conducted a detailed site assessment at their Round Rock property that day, including soil testing and drainage evaluation. I grab my phone and scroll back through my calendar app, finding the date in question.
I was working on a logo design project for a local bakery. I have email timestamps and file modification records that show I was at my apartment all day. Rodriguez, given the complexity of this situation and the conflicting information we're receiving, I need to schedule a formal interview at our downtown office. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.? After ending the call, I pace around my apartment while trying to process the implications of Detective Morrison's questions. Multiple clients believe they've met with me personally, received design services from me directly, and worked with me on landscaping projects I've never heard of. Someone has been impersonating me in face-to-face business interactions, apparently with enough skill and knowledge to convince clients they were dealing with a legitimate landscape design professional. The only person who could pull off that level of impersonation would be someone who knows me intimately, someone familiar with my mannerisms, my professional vocabulary, my communication style. Someone who's spent years observing how I interact with clients, how I present design concepts, how I conduct business consultations. I call Rachel despite the late hour, needing to discuss this development with someone who understands my professional capabilities and can help me make sense of what's happening. Emma, oh my God, what time is it? Are you okay? Rachel, I need to ask you something important. Over the past year, have you ever seen Sam at our office when I wasn't there? Maybe talking to Marcus about my projects or asking detailed questions about my design process. Actually, yes, several times. I always assumed you'd sent her to handle administrative stuff while you were busy with client work. She seemed to know a lot about your current projects and your design methodology. What kind of questions was she asking? Professional stuff. How you approach initial client consultations, what software you use for design presentations, your pricing structure for different types of projects. She said she was thinking about getting into design work herself and wanted to learn from your process. The pieces fall into place with devastating clarity. Sam hasn't just been stealing my identity for business registration and financial purposes. She's been systematically studying my professional methods, learning my design vocabulary, and preparing to impersonate me in client interactions. The landscaping expertise she lacks could be supplemented by online research and consultation with Dad and Kyle, but the professional demeanor and client communication skills she's observed through countless visits to Creative Solutions. Rachel, did she ever ask about specific client types or project requirements? Did she seem particularly interested in landscape or outdoor design projects? Now that you mention it, yes. She asked a lot of questions about how design principles translate between different media, whether the same aesthetic concepts apply to outdoor spaces, how you would approach spatial planning for large-scale projects. I thought she was just trying to understand the breadth of design applications. She was learning how to impersonate me professionally. I explained the evening's discoveries about Rodriguez Design Services, the frozen business account, and Detective Morrison's questions about client meetings I never attended. Rachel listens with growing alarm as the scope of the impersonation becomes clear. Emma, this is terrifying. She's been using your professional identity to conduct business with clients who think they're hiring you. The liability implications are enormous. I know. And now the police are investigating because clients are filing fraud complaints, but they don't know who they actually dealt with. As far as they're concerned, they hired Emma Rodriguez and got scammed by Emma Rodriguez. You need documentation to prove you weren't involved in any of these client interactions. Email records, calendar entries, witness statements, anything that establishes your actual whereabouts during the times when Sam was apparently impersonating you. After ending the call with Rachel, I spend the rest of the night compiling evidence of my legitimate activities over the past year. Email timestamps, calendar entries, client communications through Creative Solutions, even social media posts and photo metadata that place me at my apartment or legitimate work locations during times when Emma Rodriguez was apparently conducting business as a landscape designer. The documentation reveals a disturbing pattern. Many of the dates when Sam was impersonating me correspond with times when I was particularly busy with demanding graphic design projects, working long hours from my home office and declining social invitations to meet deadlines. My family would have known about these intensive work periods through casual conversations, giving Sam perfect cover to schedule Emma Rodriguez meetings, while the real Emma was demonstrably occupied with other work. By dawn, I have a comprehensive timeline that proves Sam has been systematically impersonating me in professional contexts for at least 8 months, possibly longer. The evidence includes email exchanges with Creative Solutions clients that demonstrate I was working on graphic design projects during specific times when Rodriguez Design Services clients claim to have met with me for landscape consultations. I also discover something that makes my blood run cold. Several of the landscaping projects shown on the Rodriguez Design Services website feature outdoor elements that incorporate graphic design principles I've used in my legitimate work. Custom signage, branded outdoor installations, landscape layouts that mirror spatial concepts from my portfolio. Sam hasn't just been impersonating my professional demeanor. She's been adapting my actual design work to landscaping applications, creating a convincing facade of expertise by translating my graphic design skills to outdoor spaces. The realization hits me like a physical blow. This isn't just identity theft or business fraud. Sam has been systematically studying, copying, and exploiting my creative work to build credibility for her impersonation. She's taken design concepts I developed for legitimate clients and repurposed them for landscaping projects, creating a false portfolio that demonstrates apparent expertise in a field where she has no training. My phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. Miss Rodriguez, this is Jennifer Walsh from Sunset Ridge Development. We've been trying to reach you about urgent issues with the Rodriguez Design Services contract. Can you call me first thing Monday morning? We need to discuss significant concerns about your company's qualifications and financial stability. Another message arrives immediately after. Emma, this is Caroline Martinez. My husband and I are supposed to meet with you tomorrow to review the final landscape design for our backyard project. Given the issues with your business account, we're concerned about moving forward. Please call us to clarify the situation. The cascade of client communications continues throughout the early morning hours, each message representing another obligation created by Sam's impersonation, another potential legal liability created by her fraudulent business activities. The scope of the damage extends far beyond the mortgage and business registration fraud. She's created contractual obligations, taken client deposits, and made professional commitments that legally trace back to my stolen identity. By the time I need to leave for my appointment with Detective Morrison, I have evidence of at least 15 separate client relationships established through Sam's impersonation, representing combined contract values exceeding $400,000. The legal and financial exposure from her activities could potentially bankrupt me even if I successfully prove my innocence in criminal proceedings. I arrive at the Austin Police Department downtown office 30 minutes early, carrying a briefcase full of documentation and evidence compiled during my sleepless night. The Financial Crimes Division occupies a sterile floor of cubicles and interview rooms, with Detective Morrison greeting me in the lobby exactly at 10 a.m. She's younger than I expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a direct manner that suggests extensive experience with complex fraud cases. Her interview room contains a small table, 2 chairs, and recording equipment that she activates after explaining my rights and confirming I understand the voluntary nature of our conversation. Miss Rodriguez, I want to start by saying that your attorney contacted our office earlier this morning and provided preliminary documentation supporting your claim of identity theft. However, we've received very specific allegations from clients who insist they dealt with you personally, so we need to work through the discrepancies. She opens a folder containing printed photos and client statements. Can you look at these images and tell me if you recognize any of the locations? The photos show residential properties in various stages of landscape development, some featuring partially completed installations that appear professional and well-designed. None of the locations look familiar, and I've never seen any of these properties before. I don't recognize any of these places, Detective Morrison. According to our client statements, you conducted site visits at each of these properties between March and October of this year. The clients describe detailed conversations with you about soil conditions, drainage requirements, plant selection, and design aesthetics. She pulls out additional documents. Here's a contract signed by Emma Rodriguez for landscape design services worth $23,000. The client, Mrs. Patterson, says she met with you 3 times to discuss the project details and that you demonstrated extensive knowledge of native Texas plants and sustainable irrigation techniques. The signature on the contract is another perfect forgery, indistinguishable from my actual handwriting. But the content of the conversation Mrs. Patterson described reveals how Sam managed to conduct convincing professional consultations despite lacking landscape design training.
Detective, my sister Sam has been systematically studying my professional methods and design vocabulary for over a year. She's also been researching landscape design techniques online and learning from my father, who has basic landscaping experience. Between those resources and her observation of my client interaction style, she could probably conduct convincing consultations with homeowners who aren't experts in the field. So you're saying your sister has been impersonating you in client meetings? And I have documentation that proves I was working on graphic design projects from my home office during many of the times when clients claimed to have met with Emma Rodriguez for landscape consultations. I present the timeline I compiled overnight, showing email exchanges, file modification records, and calendar entries that establish my whereabouts during the alleged client meetings. Detective Morrison reviews the documentation carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific dates and times. This is helpful, Miss Rodriguez. Can you think of any reason why multiple clients would specifically describe meeting with someone who matches your appearance and uses your name, if your sister was actually conducting these meetings? The question reveals something I hadn't fully considered. For Sam's impersonation to be convincing, she would need to physically resemble me enough that clients wouldn't notice the deception when they later saw my actual photos on business documents or professional profiles. Detective Sam and I are both about the same height and build. We have similar coloring and facial features. If she studied my mannerisms and professional vocabulary, and if the clients only met with her a few times in outdoor settings where lighting and context might be different, they could easily mistake her for me. Have you and your sister ever been confused for each other before? Occasionally when we were younger, people sometimes thought we were twins even though she's 3 years younger. As adults we look less similar, but in professional contexts where people are focused on business discussions rather than personal details, the resemblance could be convincing. Detective Morrison makes notes while I explain the family dynamics that enabled Sam's access to my professional information and business methods. The interview continues for over an hour, covering the timeline of the identity theft, the scope of the fraudulent business operations, and the evidence I've compiled to demonstrate my non-involvement in Rodriguez Design Services activities. Ms. Rodriguez, based on the documentation you've provided, and the preliminary investigation our department has conducted, it appears you are indeed a victim of sophisticated identity theft rather than a perpetrator of business fraud. However, you should be aware that the civil liability issues remain complex. Even if criminal charges are filed against your family members, you may still face lawsuits from clients who suffered financial losses. What does that mean practically? It means that clients who paid deposits or suffered damages due to Rodriguez Design Services' failure to complete contracted work may pursue civil litigation against you as the registered business owner, regardless of whether you were actually involved in the fraudulent activities. Proving your innocence in criminal court doesn't automatically resolve civil liability claims. The conversation ends with Detective Morrison explaining the next steps in the criminal investigation. The Financial Crimes Division will interview my family members, examine the business records seized from the frozen bank account, and coordinate with federal agencies regarding the scope of the fraud operation. We'll also need to interview your sister about her alleged impersonation activities, and gather evidence about how she obtained the knowledge and documentation necessary to conduct convincing client consultations. Leaving the police station, I feel simultaneously relieved and terrified. Relieved that the criminal investigation appears to support my innocence, but terrified about the civil liability implications that could affect my financial future for years, regardless of the criminal case outcomes. The drive back to Cedar Park gives me time to process the morning's revelations. Sam hasn't just stolen my identity for business registration and financial fraud, she's committed a far more personal violation by studying and copying my professional methods, my creative work, and my client interaction style to build credibility for her impersonation. The betrayal feels deeper than simple financial crime. She's taken the skills and expertise I developed through years of education and professional experience, repurposed them for fraudulent business activities, and potentially destroyed my reputation in a community where word-of-mouth referrals are essential for freelance success. My phone rings as I pull into my apartment complex. Jessica's number appears on the screen, and I answer while walking up the stairs to my front door. Emma, how did the police interview go? Better than I expected regarding criminal liability, but the civil exposure is potentially devastating. Even if I prove I wasn't involved in the business operations, I could still be sued by every client who lost money. There's something else you need to know. The bank's fraud investigation team discovered additional financial irregularities this morning. It looks like Rodriguez Design Services has been operating multiple accounts at different banks, all using variations of your personal information. I unlock my apartment door, while Pixel greets me with unusual enthusiasm, as if sensing the stress radiating from every interaction I've had today. Multiple accounts, at least 3 that we've identified so far. The main account at our bank, a payroll account at Community Trust, and what appears to be a client deposit account at Texas Regional Credit Union. The total amount involved could be significantly higher than we initially calculated. The scope of the fraud operation continues expanding with each new discovery, revealing a level of sophistication and planning that suggests this wasn't an opportunistic family scheme, but a deliberate long-term business strategy built on systematic identity theft and professional impersonation. Jessica, how is this possible? How can someone open multiple business accounts using the same stolen identity without triggering any fraud detection systems? Unfortunately, the banking industry's verification systems rely heavily on documentation that family members often have legitimate access to. Social security numbers, birth certificates, utility bills, employment records. Your family has been building this false identity profile for years, probably without you realizing the scope of what they were collecting. After ending the call, I sit on my couch with Pixel purring against my side, trying to comprehend the full magnitude of what my family has done. They haven't just committed mortgage fraud or business registration fraud. They've created an entire parallel version of my professional life, complete with multiple bank accounts, client relationships, contractual obligations, and legal liabilities that could affect my financial future for decades. The personal betrayal cuts deeper than the financial crime. They've taken my reputation, my expertise, my professional identity, and my creative work, repurposing everything I've built through years of effort to support their fraudulent business operations. They've stolen not just my name or credit, but my entire professional persona, using it to deceive clients who trusted them based on credentials and expertise I worked years to develop. Tomorrow I'll meet with David Martinez to discuss the expanding civil liability implications and begin developing a strategy to protect whatever remains of my professional reputation and financial stability. Tonight I'm going to order Chinese takeout, watch mindless television, and try to process the reality that my sister has been impersonating me professionally for months, potentially destroying relationships and opportunities I may never be able to rebuild. The phone rings again. This time it's Mom. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear the explanations, justifications, and emotional manipulation that are undoubtedly coming. For the first time in my life, my family's crisis isn't my emergency to solve, their legal troubles aren't my responsibility to minimize, and their financial collapse isn't my problem to prevent. I'm just Emma Rodriguez, graphic designer, cat owner, and victim of the most sophisticated and personal identity theft operation I could ever have imagined, committed by people who exploited every aspect of my trust and love to steal everything I've worked to build. The law office of Martinez and Associates occupies the 15th floor of a glass tower overlooking downtown Austin, with floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the Colorado River and the sprawling hills beyond. David Martinez greets me in a conference room equipped with multiple monitors, document scanners, and filing systems that suggest experience with complex fraud cases requiring extensive evidence management. Ms. Rodriguez, I've spent the weekend reviewing all the documentation you've provided, plus the additional materials Detective Morrison shared with our office. This case represents one of the most sophisticated family-based identity theft operations I've encountered in 20 years of practice. He spread several folders across the polished conference table, each labeled with different aspects of the fraud operation. Mortgage documents, business registrations, bank account records, client contracts, police reports, and what appears to be a comprehensive timeline spanning 3 years of systematic deception. The good news is that we have overwhelming evidence of your non-involvement in the fraudulent activities. Email records, calendar entries, work documentation, witness statements from your legitimate clients, all establishing clear alibis for times when your sister was impersonating you professionally. What's the bad news? The civil liability exposure remains substantial. Even though criminal charges will likely be filed against your family members, you're still legally registered as the owner of Rodriguez Design Services. Every contract they signed,
every client deposit they accepted, every professional obligation they created traces back to your stolen identity. David pulls out a thick folder containing what appears to be client contracts and correspondence. We've identified 23 separate client relationships established through your sister's impersonation activities. Combined contract values exceed $480,000, with approximately $95,000 in client deposits already collected. Can't the criminal case evidence prove that I wasn't actually involved in these contracts? Criminal liability and civil liability operate under different standards of proof. In criminal court, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. In civil court, clients only need to demonstrate that they suffered financial losses due to breach of contract, regardless of who actually signed the agreements. He explains that several clients have already retained attorneys to pursue recovery of deposits and damages through civil litigation. Even if I successfully prove that Sam forged my signature and impersonated me in client meetings, I may still be legally responsible for financial obligations created through the fraudulent business activities. The most effective strategy at this point is aggressive documentation and proactive communication. We need to contact every affected client directly, explain the fraud situation, and attempt to negotiate settlements that minimize your financial exposure while providing them with reasonable recovery options. What kind of settlements? Ideally, we'd arrange for return of any deposits they paid, plus reasonable compensation for expenses they incurred based on Rodriguez Design Services commitments. Your family members would be legally obligated to provide these funds as restitution, both through criminal sentencing and civil judgments. David shows me financial analysis documents that outline potential exposure scenarios. Best case, my family members accept full responsibility and provide complete restitution to affected clients. Worst case, they declare bankruptcy or flee prosecution, leaving me liable for hundreds of thousands in civil judgments that could affect my financial future for decades. There's another complication we need to discuss. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation has opened an investigation into unlicensed contracting activities by Rodriguez Design Services. If they determine that landscape architecture work was performed without proper credentials,
Additional penalties and professional sanctions could apply. Professional sanctions against me, potentially. Even though you didn't perform any of the work, your name and educational credentials were used to obtain business licensing and client contracts. The licensing board may impose sanctions to protect public safety, regardless of whether you were actually involved in the fraudulent activities. The conversation continues for over 2 hours, covering legal strategies, timeline projections, and potential outcomes for both criminal and civil proceedings. David explains that the most critical factor in minimizing long-term damage will be my family's cooperation in accepting responsibility and providing restitution to affected clients. Ms. Rodriguez, I strongly recommend that we arrange a family meeting where I can explain the legal realities they're facing and encourage voluntary cooperation. If they understand the severity of potential criminal charges and civil liability, they may be motivated to negotiate a resolution that protects everyone's interests. You want me to sit in a room with people who spent years systematically stealing my identity and destroying my professional reputation. I understand how difficult that would be emotionally. But practically speaking, their cooperation could mean the difference between manageable financial settlements and devastating civil judgments. If they refuse to accept responsibility or provide restitution, the legal process could extend for years and cost exponentially more in legal fees and damages. After leaving David's office, I drive through Austin traffic while processing the strategic implications of what he's proposing. A family meeting where I confront the people who betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible, not for emotional closure or personal reconciliation, but as a practical necessity to protect my financial future from the consequences of their criminal activities. The irony feels overwhelming. After years of being the family problem solver, the reliable daughter who handled crises and smoothed over conflicts, I'm now in a position where I need their cooperation to minimize damage from their betrayal of everything I've worked to build. My phone rings while I'm stopped at a traffic light. Rachel's number appears on the screen, and I answer using the car's Bluetooth system. Emma, how did the meeting with your lawyer go? Complicated. Legally, I can probably prove my innocence in criminal court, but the civil liability could be financially devastating unless my family cooperates with restitution efforts. Are you going to meet with them? David thinks a family conference might be the most effective way to encourage voluntary cooperation and minimize long-term legal costs. But honestly, Rachel, I don't know if I can sit in a room with people who spent years systematically exploiting my trust to steal my identity. What would happen if you don't meet with them? The legal process could drag on for years, costing tens of thousands in attorney fees while clients pursue individual lawsuits against me. Even if I eventually win every case, the financial and professional damage could be irreparable. Rachel listens while I explain the scope of civil liability exposure and the potential for professional sanctions from licensing boards. Her response reflects the practical concerns of someone who understands the freelance design industry and the importance of reputation for independent contractors. Emma, your professional reputation is everything in our field. Word-of-mouth referrals, client trust, community standing, all of that could be permanently damaged if this situation isn't resolved quickly and definitively. I know that's what makes David's recommendation so difficult. Meeting with my family feels like capitulating to people who don't deserve any consideration, but it might be the only way to protect what's left of my career. That evening, I sit in my apartment with Pixel curled on my lap, staring at my phone while debating whether to call Mom and arrange the family meeting David recommended. The thought of voluntarily entering a room with people who systematically betrayed my trust feels like psychological self-harm, but the alternative could be financial ruin and professional destruction. I finally dial Mom's number around 8 p.m., when I know she'll be finishing dinner and settling into her evening routine. She answers on the second ring, her voice immediately shifting to the careful tone she's used since the fraud investigation began. "Emma, I'm so glad you called. We've all been worried about you. Mom, I need to arrange a family meeting to discuss the legal situation with Rodriguez Design Services. My attorney wants to explain the criminal charges and civil liability everyone is facing." Criminal charges? Emma, surely we can work this out privately without involving lawyers and police. It's already involved lawyers and police, Mom. The FBI is investigating federal fraud charges. Multiple clients are filing lawsuits. The Texas Licensing Board is reviewing unlicensed contracting violations. This isn't something we can handle privately anymore. Silence stretches between us while Mom processes the scope of legal consequences she apparently hadn't anticipated. When she speaks again, her voice carries a different quality, less manipulative and more genuinely frightened. "What kind of criminal charges?" "Identity theft, business fraud, unlicensed contracting, potentially federal wire fraud if any clients were contacted across state lines. Dad could face additional charges for his role as co-signer on the fraudulent mortgage." "Emma, you have to help us. We're your family." "I am helping you, Mom. I'm offering to arrange a meeting where my attorney can explain your legal options and discuss cooperation strategies that might minimize criminal sentences and civil liability." The conversation continues for 30 minutes, with Mom alternating between denial about the severity of the situation and desperate pleas for me to somehow make the legal consequences disappear. I explain repeatedly that the fraud investigation is beyond my control, that federal agencies and multiple law enforcement departments are now involved, that my only remaining influence is whether to pursue maximum penalties or encourage cooperation that could benefit everyone. "Can you arrange for everyone to meet at David's office this Friday afternoon? Dad, you, Sam and Kyle all need to hear this information directly from a criminal defense attorney. Kyle doesn't want to meet with lawyers. He says you're trying to destroy the family out of spite. Kyle can choose not to attend, but he should understand that non-cooperation will be factored into sentencing recommendations and civil liability calculations. The people who take responsibility and provide restitution will face significantly different consequences than those who refuse to acknowledge their criminal behavior." Friday afternoon arrives gray and drizzly, typical October weather that matches my mood as I drive downtown to David's office. I arrive early and spend 20 minutes in the parking garage, gathering emotional strength for what promises to be the most difficult conversation of my life. David greets me in the lobby and escorts me to the large conference room where he's arranged documents and legal materials for the family presentation. "Remember, Miss Rodriguez, this meeting is about practical legal strategy, not emotional reconciliation. Focus on the facts, the evidence and the consequences they're facing. What if they refuse to accept responsibility or provide restitution? Then we document their non-cooperation and use that information to support maximum penalty recommendations in criminal sentencing and aggressive pursuit of civil remedies. But let's hope they understand the gravity of their situation and choose a more constructive approach." Mom arrives first, dressed in her best outfit and carrying a purse that suggests she's treating this like a formal business meeting rather than a criminal defense consultation. She hugs me tentatively, and I allow the brief contact while maintaining emotional distance. Dad and Sam arrive together, their expressions suggesting they've spent the drive discussing strategy for minimizing their legal exposure. Kyle enters last, his defensive posture and avoided eye contact indicating he's approaching this meeting as an adversarial proceeding rather than a family crisis requiring cooperation. David begins with a comprehensive presentation of the criminal charges each family member is facing, supported by evidence collected during the fraud investigation. Financial documents, business records, client statements, bank account analysis, and forensic examination of signatures and document authenticity. Mr. Rodriguez, as the co-signer on the fraudulent mortgage, you face federal charges for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. These charges carry potential sentences of 10 to 20 years in federal prison. Dad's face drains of color as David explains that co-signing the mortgage with knowledge of the forged application documents constitutes active participation in the fraud conspiracy, not merely passive enabling of Sam and Kyle's activities. Rodriguez, David continues, addressing Sam directly, your impersonation of your sister in client meetings constitutes identity theft, professional impersonation, and unlicensed contracting violations. Combined with the business registration fraud, you're facing 12 separate felony charges with potential sentences totaling 30 to 40 years. Sam begins crying immediately, apparently unprepared for the severity of criminal exposure her activities have created. Kyle's defensive posture shifts to obvious panic as David explains his liability for business operations, client fraud, and conspiracy charges related to the systematic identity theft. The federal prosecutor assigned to this case has indicated willingness to consider plea agreements for defendants who accept full responsibility and provide complete restitution to victims. However, cooperation must be comprehensive and immediate. David presents detailed restitution calculations showing that affected clients are owed approximately $127,000 in return deposits, plus additional damages for expenses incurred based on fraudulent contract commitments. The total civil liability could exceed $200,000, not including legal fees and penalties. How are we supposed to pay $200,000? Kyle asks, his voice tight with desperation. We don't have that kind of money. Mr. Henderson, that's why cooperation is essential. The court will consider payment plans, asset liquidation, and alternative restitution methods for defendants who accept responsibility. However, those options are only available to people who acknowledge their criminal behavior and demonstrate genuine efforts to compensate victims. Mom speaks for the first time since the meeting began. What happens if we cooperate? What kind of sentences would they face? Cooperation could reduce sentences significantly. Instead of decades in federal prison, your family members might face 2 to 5 years, with possibilities for reduced sentences based on restitution efforts and victim impact mitigation. The room falls silent as everyone processes the stark choice between cooperation with manageable consequences or resistance with devastating penalties. I watch their faces, seeing the gradual realization that their criminal activities have created legal exposure far beyond anything they anticipated. There's one additional factor you need to understand, David continues. Emma Rodriguez has been completely cooperative with law enforcement and has provided extensive documentation proving her non-involvement in your criminal activities. Her cooperation will be noted favorably in all proceedings. Emma's cooperation. Sam looks at me directly for the first time since entering the conference room. You mean her betrayal of her own family? I mean her legal obligation to report crimes committed using her stolen identity, David responds firmly. Rodriguez discovered that you had created business liabilities that could bankrupt her financially and destroy her professional reputation permanently. She had no choice but to protect herself through legal channels. Dad finally speaks, his voice heavy with resignation. What exactly does cooperation require? Complete confession to all criminal activities, detailed accounting of all fraudulent transactions, return of all stolen assets, comprehensive restitution to all victims, and testimony supporting prosecution of any additional co-conspirators. Testimony against family members. If necessary, yes. The federal prosecutor wants complete accountability for this fraud operation. Partial cooperation or attempts to minimize individual responsibility will not be acceptable. The meeting continues for another hour, with David explaining plea agreement procedures, restitution calculation methods, and timeline expectations for resolution. My family members ask increasingly desperate questions about alternatives to accepting full responsibility, each answer reinforcing that cooperation represents their only realistic option for avoiding maximum penalties. "We need time to discuss this privately," Mom finally says. "This is a lot to process. You have until Monday morning to contact the federal prosecutor with your decision," David responds. "After that, plea agreement opportunities may no longer be available." As my family members file out of the conference room, each avoiding eye contact with me, I remain seated while processing the surreal experience of watching people I love face the consequences of systematically betraying my trust and exploiting my identity for criminal purposes. "How do you think they'll respond?" I ask David after the room empties. "They'll probably spend the weekend trying to find alternatives to accepting full responsibility. But realistically, the evidence against them is overwhelming. Cooperation represents their only viable option for minimizing criminal sentences and civil liability. And if they refuse to cooperate, then we pursue maximum penalties and aggressive civil recovery on behalf of all affected clients. The legal process will be longer and more expensive, but the eventual outcomes will be significantly worse for them." Monday morning arrives with unseasonably warm weather that feels inappropriate for what promises to be a decisive day in resolving the fraud case. I spend the morning working on legitimate graphic design projects, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy while waiting for news about my family's decision. David calls at 11 a.m. with an update from the federal prosecutor's office. "Your family retained their own attorney over the weekend, who contacted the prosecutor this morning to discuss plea agreement terms." That sounds promising. It is. Their attorney indicated that all 4 family members are prepared to accept responsibility and provide full restitution in exchange for reduced sentences and structured payment plans for civil liability. The relief I feel is complicated by lingering anger about the necessity of this entire legal process. My family's decision to cooperate stems from fear of consequences rather than genuine remorse for the betrayal and damage they've caused. But practically speaking, their cooperation represents the best possible outcome for minimizing my long-term financial and professional exposure. What happens next? Formal plea hearings will be scheduled within the next few weeks. Your family members will provide complete confessions, detailed financial accounting, and commitments to comprehensive restitution. The business assets will be liquidated, the fraudulent accounts will be closed, and affected clients will be compensated according to court-supervised payment plans. And the civil liability, significantly reduced. With your family accepting criminal responsibility and providing restitution, most clients will be satisfied with recovering their losses rather than pursuing additional damages through lengthy litigation. The criminal proceedings unfold over the following months with bureaucratic efficiency that feels surreal given the personal devastation underlying each court appearance. Sam pleads guilty to 12 felony charges and receives a sentence of 4 years in federal prison, with eligibility for early release based on restitution compliance and victim impact mitigation. Kyle accepts responsibility for conspiracy and business fraud charges, receiving a 3-year sentence with similar provisions for early release. Dad's cooperation and acceptance of responsibility result in a 2-year sentence, though his age and health issues make him eligible for home confinement rather than federal prison. Mom avoids criminal charges due to limited direct involvement in the fraud activities, but faces significant civil liability for benefiting from the fraudulent business operations. The family home in Pflugerville is sold to provide partial restitution to affected clients, with Mom relocating to a small apartment in a senior living community. The financial resolution takes longer, but eventually provides reasonable outcomes for most affected clients. The liquidation of business assets, including equipment and the remaining mortgage balance from the foreclosed house, generates approximately $85,000 toward restitution obligations. Additional payments from my family members' employment income and asset sales bring the total recovery to just over $140,000. 6 months after the initial FBI phone call that changed everything, I receive a final settlement statement showing that all criminal restitution obligations have been fulfilled and all civil claims have been resolved. The Professional Licensing Board investigation concludes with a finding that no sanctions are appropriate, given my documented non-involvement in the unlicensed contracting activities.
The personal cost of the resolution extends far beyond financial considerations. Relationships with my parents remain cordial but distant, limited to occasional text messages and carefully neutral holiday greetings. Sam writes letters from federal prison that I read but don't answer, understanding that some betrayals create irreparable damage to trust and connection. The professional impact proves more positive than I anticipated. Several clients who learned about the fraud situation through news coverage specifically seek out my legitimate graphic design services, impressed by my cooperation with law enforcement and my commitment to ethical business practices. Word spreads through the Austin design community that I'm someone who prioritizes integrity over family loyalty when faced with criminal behavior. A year later, my freelance business has grown substantially, supported by clients who appreciate working with someone who demonstrated moral courage under extreme personal pressure. I've moved to a larger apartment with dedicated office space and have expanded my services to include brand consulting and digital marketing design. Rachel and I have formalized our business partnership as Rodriguez Kim Creative Solutions, with a client roster that includes several high-profile Austin businesses and nonprofit organizations. Our reputation for ethical practices and reliable service attracts clients who value integrity in their professional relationships. The most unexpected positive outcome involves my relationship with Jessica, my college roommate whose call initiated this entire ordeal. We've developed a close friendship based on mutual respect for professional ethics and personal integrity. She's been promoted to regional manager at First National Bank, partly due to her handling of complex fraud cases and her commitment to protecting customers from financial crimes. Do you ever regret reporting the fraud? She asks during one of our monthly coffee meetings. Never. I regret that it was necessary, and I regret the damage to family relationships, but I don't regret protecting myself and the innocent clients who were being victimized. Your family? My family taught me that love without boundaries enables exploitation. Real love requires holding people accountable for their behavior, even when accountability creates difficult consequences. That evening, I work on a comprehensive brand identity project for a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting small business owners who've experienced fraud and identity theft. The irony isn't lost on me that my expertise in this area stems from personal experience with sophisticated criminal betrayal by people I trusted completely. Pixel purrs contentedly beside my computer, no longer showing the anxiety and concern that characterized his behavior during the months of legal proceedings and family crisis. Our quiet apartment feels like a sanctuary built on authentic foundations rather than borrowed stability that was never really secure. My phone remains mostly quiet in the evenings, free from desperate calls about family financial emergencies and manipulative requests for assistance with problems created by other people's poor decisions. The silence feels like victory, like the sound of a life built on genuine relationships and professional accomplishments rather than obligatory family loyalty that enabled criminal behavior. Tomorrow I'll wake up in a home I pay for myself, work on projects I chose based on their merit and ethical alignment, and make decisions guided by my own values rather than family pressure to prioritize group harmony over individual integrity. It's a simple life, but it's authentically mine, in ways I never understood were possible before learning to distinguish between healthy family support and enabling criminal exploitation. The mortgage fraud case is officially closed, the civil litigation has been resolved, and the professional licensing issues have been dismissed. But the lessons about trust, boundaries, and the difference between love and exploitation continue to guide every relationship and business decision I make. I've learned that family loyalty should flow both ways, that professional success requires protecting the reputation and integrity that make it possible, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that refusal creates painful consequences for everyone involved. The people who deserved my loyalty were the innocent clients who trusted Rodriguez Design Services to fulfill legitimate contracts, not the family members who systematically betrayed that trust to steal my identity and exploit my professional reputation for their criminal enterprise. Justice, I've discovered, sometimes requires choosing strangers' welfare over family convenience, professional ethics over personal relationships, and individual integrity over group loyalty. It's a difficult lesson that came at significant personal cost, but one that has created a foundation for relationships and professional success built on genuine mutual respect rather than obligatory family enabling. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.